From the moment SHEDEUR Sanders stepped onto the field for Cleveland, the story around him felt fixed. He wasn't seen as a long-term answer, just another experiment for a struggling franchise. But when he finally got his shot late in the year, he didn't flinch, delivering back-to-back wins and steady quarterback play. Still, the conversation didn't shift. Then came the hit from Cedric Johnson, brutal, late, and emblematic of everything Sanders had quietly endured all season. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. The NFL's fine days later wasn't loud, but it was decisive. It rewrote the season subtext. SHEDEUR wasn't just surviving. He was getting overlooked. With the league's quiet acknowledgement of wrongdoing, it became clear that Sanders had been operating under conditions few rookies face. This wasn't just about one game or one hit. It was about the accumulation of disregard. In a franchise riddled with uncertainty, the mere mention of someone like John Harbaugh as head coach reframes what's possible. Suddenly, a quarterback once dismissed as a placeholder looks more like a piece worth building around. Not because of hype, but because of how he held up when no one was watching. The 2025 NFL season did SHEDEUR Sanders no favors. From the jump, he was under microscope, picked apart by analysts, benched for stretches, and thrown into a situation that would have chewed up a less composed quarterback. He didn't get the reps he should have. He didn't get the protection he needed. And most importantly, he didn't get the respect a young player in his position deserved. Not from the officiating crews, not from the league, and not from the media. But somewhere between the silence and the shrugged shoulders, something finally gave. It happened after Week 18. Cleveland, Cincinnati. The Browns were once again in survival mode. The season had spiraled. The head coach was gone. Directionless chaos defined the locker room. And then, boom, a late hit on Sanders from Bengals defender Cedric Johnson. The kind of hit that quarterbacks are supposedly protected from in today's NFL. The kind of hit that, when it happens to a marquee name, usually draws outrage. But for Sanders, it was business as usual. Except this time, the flag came out. And days later, quietly, without headlines or press briefing, the NFL dropped a $5,000 fine on Johnson. No quotes from Goodell. No media push. Just a line in the post-game accountability report. That was it. But for anyone who'd been following Sanders' season, anyone who watched him take shot after shot with little to no consequence, this wasn't just a fine. It was the moment the league finally blinked, because that fine wasn't about money. It was about admission. It was the league saying, yeah, we saw it too. And that small admission changed everything. It reframed an entire season of hits, non-calls, and dismissive coverage. It confirmed what fans have been yelling about for months, that the physical punishment Sanders endured was not being treated like it should have been, that other quarterbacks were getting protection he wasn't, that something wasn't adding up. And this wasn't just one bad hit. It was the latest in a season-long trend of high-impact contact that rarely drew a whistle. Time after time, Sanders got hit late, hit low, hit high, whatever you want to call it. It happened. And most of the time, no penalty. No post-game review. No action. So when the league finally stepped in, even quietly, it cracked the wall. It forced a reassessment. Because once the league confirms that one hit was excessive, it opens the door to ask, what about the rest? Were those hits not worth flagging? Were they reviewed? And if they weren't fined, what does that say about the threshold the league uses to protect young quarterbacks? And how many hits did Sanders have to take before someone at the top finally said enough? The answer came too late to change the outcome of the season. But it came, and that's why it mattered. Because context, finally, started to enter the conversation. For months, the noise around Sanders was predictable. The media fixated on whether he was ready. Fans debated if he was overhyped. His performance was reduced to surface-level stats, stripped of context. But none of that reflected what was actually happening on the field. What was happening was that SHEDEUR Sanders was being tested in one of the most chaotic environments in the league. Cleveland had no offensive consistency, no coaching continuity, No long-term strategy. It was survival football. And through it all, Sanders stayed composed. He avoided turnovers. He found ways to extend plays. And when given a chance, he delivered back-to-back wins. The only time the Browns managed that all season. Still, it wasn't enough to change the conversation. Because when you're not being protected, physically or reputationally, it's not about what you do. It's about what they say you didn't. Until the fine, that changed how people had to talk about Sanders. Suddenly, the physical punishment he took wasn't speculative. It was acknowledged, documented, punished. And that acknowledgement came straight from Commissioner Goodell's office, whether it was publicized or not. And while the fine itself was modest, just $5,000, the process behind it wasn't. These fines don't happen automatically. They come after film review, internal discussion, consensus among league executives, and final sign-off. It's deliberate, it's official, and it means the league agreed that Sanders was subject to unnecessary roughness. Not just from Cedric Johnson, but from a system that let it go on for far too long. That kind of quiet confirmation doesn't go unnoticed, and it didn't just validate the fan frustration. It put pressure on the Browns. Because now, it's not just about whether Sanders deserves to be the starter. It's about whether the organization is going to treat him like a legitimate asset, whether they're going to protect him, invest in his development, and, maybe most importantly, build something around him instead of constantly looking past him. And this brings us to the other major piece of the story, Cleveland's leadership vacuum. The Browns are in a holding pattern, with their coaching situation unresolved and no clear direction. It's hard to talk about future plans, but that doesn't stop the speculation. And one name has changed the conversation entirely, John Harbaugh. The moment Harbaugh was floated as a possible head coach candidate, everything shifted. Because Harbaugh is known for structure, for quarterback development, for organizational alignment. He doesn't walk into chaos. He builds systems to eliminate it. And if someone like him sees potential in Cleveland, you have to assume it's not because of some total teardown. It's because he sees something he can work with. That something might just be SHEDEUR Sanders. Harbaugh doesn't take chances on unstable situations unless there's a core worth developing. And if he believes that core includes Sanders, that a quiet endorsement that carries more weight than anything the league office could ever print. Because at the end of the day, coaches like Harbaugh know how hard it is to find a young quarterback with composure, resilience, and leadership. Someone who can take hits all year, on the field and in the media, and still walk into the locker room with his head up, ready to work. Sanders has already proven he can do that. And now that the league has acknowledged at least one of those hits as over the line, the excuse of treating him like just another rookie with growing pains, that's over. Now, it's about what Cleveland does next. They can go the easy route, wipe the slate clean again, draft someone new, start the cycle over. Or they can recognize what they have. A quarterback who handled one of the toughest rookie years possible with poise, and who now has the league's own fine as proof that his journey was exaggerated. It was real. And the longer they wait to decide, the more pressure builds. Because the fan base isn't blind. They saw the hits. They saw the flags that weren't thrown. And now they've seen what happens when the league finally steps up, even if it took too long. What comes next could determine more than Sanders' future. It could decide whether the Browns continue spinning their wheels or finally start building something stable. So what do you think? Was the fine enough? Should the Browns commit to Sanders as their QB1? And is the NFL doing enough to actually protect young quarterbacks, or just cleaning up messes after the fact? Drop your thoughts below. Like if you've been yelling about this all season. Share if you've had to argue this point one too many times, and subscribe to stay locked in. Because this story, it's far from over. Here's the thing about SHEDEUR Sanders' rookie season. People saw the stats, but they didn't see the season. They didn't see the broken pockets collapsing before the ball was even snapped. They didn't see the hits that came after the whistle. They didn't see the drives that were sabotaged not by poor reads or inexperience, but by blown protections, drop balls, and a system in disarray. What they did see, what the media ran with, was a rookie quarterback who wasn't lighting up the scoreboard. A player who was, on paper, just fine. And in a league obsessed with instant success and clean narratives, Fine isn't enough, especially not when your last name is Sanders, and everyone has an opinion before you even throw your first professional pass. But behind the curtain of box scores and bottom line, Takes was a player who stood tall in an organization that, frankly, didn't give him much to stand on. And the NFL just quietly confirmed that. Because when Cedric Johnson got fined $5,000 for that late hit in Week 18, it wasn't just about one moment. It was a rare, subtle acknowledgement that Sanders had been playing under conditions most rookies don't face. The kind of conditions that should derail development. The kind that do ruin careers. And yet he was still there, still taking snaps, still leading a dysfunctional Browns team to back-to-back wins when few thought it was possible. This is where the conversation has to change. The fine, small as it was, cracked open a much larger issue. It forced the league, whether they meant to or not, to admit that Sanders wasn't being protected the way other quarterbacks were, that the hits he took weren't all within the normal bounds of gameplay, that at least one of those shots was unacceptable enough to warrant action from the league's top office. And when that admission comes at the end of the season, you can't help but ask, why now? Why did it take until the final game? Why didn't the multiple hits he absorbed earlier in the year trigger the same disciplinary action? Did no one see those? Or did they see them and just not care? The NFL doesn't explain these decisions. That's part of the problem. The accountability report, the same one that handed down Johnson's fine, isn't circulated with commentary or context. There's no breakdown of what crossed the line. No note to players, coaches, or fans. It's quietly posted, quietly absorbed, quietly forgotten, unless you're paying attention. And if you're paying attention, it tells you a lot. It tells you that somewhere in the review process, among the film analysts, the rule interpreters, the league executives, someone watched that hit on Sanders and said, yeah, that's too far. That statement, silent though it may be, is something Sanders never got all year. Every week, it was toughen up, or that's just football. But now there's proof. Proof that it wasn't just football, that the hits were different, that the protections weren't there, and that maybe, just maybe, he was being held to a standard no one else was. This changes the conversation in a big way, because it's not just about whether SHEDEUR Sanders played well. It's about what he played through, what he overcame, what the league let happen on its watch. And it forces people, especially in Cleveland, to take a second look at how they're evaluating him. Because if you're still judging him by surface-level results, you're missing the point. Here's what the numbers won't tell you. The number of times he bounced back up after a hit that should have drawn a flag. The way he kept the offense moving despite being thrown into a system mid-season with no clear rhythm or identity. The maturity he showed by not lashing out publicly, by refusing to make excuses, by choosing to focus on the work. You want leadership? That's leadership. And now, with the coaching situation still unresolved in Cleveland and the name John Harbaugh floating around the rumor mill, Sanders' situation has taken on new weight because Harbaugh is a coach who understands quarterbacks. He understands structure. He understands the value of protecting your guy, on the field and off, and he's not going to waste his time walking into a situation he doesn't believe in. So if there's real interest there, that's not a throwaway headline. That's a signal. It suggests that maybe Harbaugh sees what many missed, that Sanders, despite everything, held it together, that he has the tools, the discipline, and the temperament to develop into something more, that all he needs is a real system, a real coach, and a real chance. And honestly, he's earned it, because a rookie season like this would have broken a lot of players. The inconsistent playing time, the constant pressure, the injuries, the disrespect, the fact that no one was throwing flags to keep him upright until the last week of the season. But he didn't fold. He took the field when asked. He stayed ready. He didn't give the media the sound bites they wanted. He gave them quiet resilience. And now, that quiet resilience just got its first piece of validation. Again, it's not the fine itself. It's what it means. It's the fact that after all the gaslighting, after all the people insisting the hits were nothing, the league finally said, this one wasn't okay, even if they didn't say it out loud. That changes how we talk about SHEDEUR Sanders. It forces everyone, from media outlets to front office execs, to stop pretending the season happened in a vacuum. It didn't. It happened under a cloud of chaos, with a young quarterback at the center, absorbing punishment and scrutiny that went well beyond normal. Now, Cleveland's front office has a choice. Are they going to double down on the old narrative, or are they going to accept the context and start building around a player who proved he can stay poised through a season-long storm? Because here's what we know he can play. When he had the chance, he stabilized the offense. He won games. He protected the ball. He avoided the rookie mistakes that usually define a first season. He showed control. But he never got protection or the benefit of the doubt. Now that the league has validated at least part of what fans have been screaming about for months, that benefit of the doubt is finally swinging in his direction. And it's about time. This league is brutal on quarterbacks, especially young ones, especially ones who don't fit the easy narrative boxes. Sanders didn't come in as a media darling. He didn't have the support of a well-oiled machine behind him. He had Cleveland, a team in flux without an identity, without a clear plan. And yet he still delivered flashes of what he could be if given the structure he deserves. And now, the next move is on Cleveland. Do they recognize what they've got? Do they bring in a coach like Harbaugh and finally commit to building with Sanders instead of around him? Or do they reset again and risk wasting what might be their best shot at stability? That's the fork in the road. Because delayed accountability is still accountability. And now that it's on the record, the Browns can't say they didn't see it. Here's what's wild. SHEDEUR Sanders didn't need to have a breakout Rookie of the Year season to prove something. He just needed the league to stop pretending he wasn't getting hit late. Stop acting like those non-calls weren't glaring. Stop brushing off fan frustration as emotional noise. Because this wasn't a case of a fan base being overly sensitive. This was a manufactured outrage. The tape was there. The hits were there. And now, finally, so is the proof. That fine $5,000, straight from the NFL's accountability report, might be the quietest yet most significant thing to happen in Sanders' entire rookie season. Because it's not about the number. It's about the fact that it happened. It's about what it confirms. That someone in the league office saw the film, circled that hit, and said, "We can't let this slide." Too little, too late? Maybe. But still, finally, let's talk about what that means. Especially for a player like Sanders, who came into the league with more pressure than structure. Everyone knew his name. Everyone had expectations. But when the actual football started, the setup around him was anything but ideal. Cleveland wasn't ready. The offense was a mess. The coaching staff didn't have a plan. The O-line was inconsistent. And the quarterback room felt like a constant reset button. And through all of that, Sanders was expected to just figure it out. Step in mid-season, stabilize a team in crisis, and perform like a 10-year vet while getting knocked around by defenders who knew exactly where the cracks in the pocket were. And he still led the team to consecutive wins when given the opportunity. That should have been a moment. That should have been the story. But instead, all season long, people questioned whether he could handle the NFL, whether he was ready, whether he was legit. Meanwhile, the protection wasn't there. Not on the field, and not in the conversation around him. Because when you're not being flagged for, when you're being hit late and the whistles stay quiet, the league is sending a message. Whether intentional or not, it tells defenders, go ahead, push the limits. He won't get the same calls. He hasn't earned them yet. But here's the truth. When you're wearing the uniform, you have earned them. It doesn't matter if it's your first game or your 100th. If you're a quarterback in the NFL, you're supposed to be protected under the same rules as everyone else. That's what the league claims to stand for, especially in an era where quarterback safety is one of the biggest priorities. So when the late hits happen and no one does anything, it's not just unfair, it's dangerous. And now that the NFL finally issued that fine, it raises the uncomfortable question. How many hits did they let go? How many other defenders could have been penalized? Were those plays even reviewed? Because the system is designed to let the league quietly clean things up after the fact. If it wasn't for the fine report, most people wouldn't even know anything happened. There was no statement, no public accountability. Just a line in a document that said Cedric Johnson crossed a line, and by extension, validated what Sanders and Browns fans have been dealing with for months. And the fact that the NFL handled it like that, quietly, internally, with no amplification, says a lot. It says they saw what happened. It says they knew it needed to be addressed. But it also says they didn't want to make a spectacle out of it. No headlines. No questions. Why? Because if they admit one hit was over the line, they risk scrutiny over why it took that long to act. They risk people asking why Sanders wasn't protected sooner, why the missed calls kept stacking up, why a rookie quarterback was left exposed while other QBs in the league were getting instant flags for hits that looked less egregious. And when you start pulling that thread, the narrative shifts fast. Because suddenly, you can't just evaluate Sanders based on touchdowns and completions. You have to talk about what he played through, what wasn't called, what wasn't said, what protection didn't show up for him on the field and from the league. Now, the Browns are sitting on a quarterback who's shown resilience in the worst conditions, not hypothetical toughness, proven toughness. And yet, they're still sitting in limbo without a permanent head coach, still try to decide if they're building around him or starting from scratch. Enter John Harbaugh rumors. Harbaugh isn't a maybe coach. He's not a developmental experiment. If his name is being connected to Browns, that means something, because Harbaugh doesn't step into dysfunctional programs unless he sees a path to real success. He's not here to babysit. He's here to win. And if he's even considering walking into this locker room, it's not because he wants to tear it all down. It's because he believes there's something to build on. And let's be honest, what quarterback would want a coach like Harbaugh behind them? He's known for creating systems that protect his quarterbacks, that build around their strengths, that develop them over time instead of tossing them into chaos and hoping for the best. Harbaugh's interest in Cleveland sends one clear signal. This might not be as broken as people thought. In fact, it might already have the most important piece in place. That's what makes this moment so pivotal. Because now the organization has to decide if it's going to keep treating Sanders like a placeholder or start treating him like the quarterback he's already shown he can be, if given a fair shot. No more excuses. No more hiding behind development. Define, change the context. The narrative can't go back to the way it was. The league confirmed what everyone watching closely already knew. SHEDEUR Sanders wasn't just taking hits. He was taking illegal ones. And no one was doing anything about it. Until now. Now. The clock's ticking on Cleveland. The fan base knows. The media's catching on. And if they don't make the right call, the blame won't fall on Sanders. It'll fall on the people who saw potential, saw progress, saw validation, and still walked away. So here's where we leave it. SHEDEUR Sanders survived the season the hard way, the long way, the way that doesn't earn you instant praise, but builds something stronger, credibility. And when the league finally pulled back the curtain, even a little, it was enough to prove what needed proving all along. He's not just some experiment. He's not a PR move. He's a quarterback who earned respect the hardest way possible. Now it's on Cleveland to give it to him. If you've been following this story, you already know this wasn't just about a fine. It was about what that fine meant for Sanders, for Browns fans, and for how this league treats its rising talent. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should Cleveland build around SHEDEUR? Did the NFL do enough? Are we finally seeing the tide turn? Like, if you've been calling this out all year, share it with someone who's still skeptical and hit subscribe, because you know the saga's not over yet. Not even close.